In today's shenanigans, I've set a couple of tasks for myself. The first one I'm going to attempt is to do-it-yourself replacement of this little guy down here. This little guy here is the glow indicator. I mentioned before in the previous episode that the way it's designed is that there's actually an element in behind that plug, and when you hit glow on the ignition, that element heats up just like the glow plugs in the engine do, and you can see the glow through that little hole right there. Well, the element has burned out, and the replacement part for that is around $65–70, which I think I could probably do a little bit cheaper. So what I'm going to do is I have purchased a red LED and a couple of resistors, and I'm going to wire them up, and I have a holder that should hold the LED in the hole that's already there. Note I said should. And hopefully it doesn't burn out when I hit glow and it glows red. That's the first task. The second task that I want to attempt is to revisit the tack problem. I found a replacement tack if it is in fact the tack that's broken, and they're fortunately not that expensive, but still is a little bit expensive. And apparently the way these things work is that it takes a sensor on the alternator to send a signal to the tack, which then interprets the signal into RPMs. So I'm going to have a look at the alternator. Maybe I'll take it off. I hope that it's simply a connection that's come undone and the sensor is shorted out to something or the other, because I did have that one reading where when I decreased the throttle it went up, and when I increased it went down, which indicates a backwards reading. So there's something going on in there. So I'm going to have a look at that. And I've also noticed that my coolant in the cooling system, the freshwater system, is low. And I think the reason for that is because I've got a faulty radiator cap. Now, it may be just that the radiator cap has not been put on properly, and it was, as the engine warms up, it spits out a little bit of coolant. And that could also be the problem with the alternator, because coolant runs right down on the alternator. So it might be a related problem. We'll see. But anyway, I'm going to get to work on this task first, and I'll let you know how it works out. So these are the parts that I am going to use to implement my little glow plug light project. This is a holder for the red LED, that's the red LED, and that will go in here, like so. And these resistors will be soldered to the, I think it's the cathode side, maybe it's the anode side, the longer one of the two in line, so that when I put 12 volts across the LED doesn't burn. So the first step is to drill this hole out so that this holder can fit in there. So this is what my electronics looks like before it gets hooked up. I've got two resistors in series, that's end to end rather than in parallel. In order to protect the LED, I need a 1200 ohm resistance in line. Those two resistors are 560 ohms each. So that gives me a grand total of just under 1200. And they are quarter watt resistors, so having them in series like that will help dissipate the heat a little bit better. And I am going to hook this up to power right now to see if it works, and if it does, I will heat shrink the hot side, and then I will wire it into the control panel in a more permanent fashion. Not much progress in terms of the tasks I set for myself today. The LED project didn't work. The LED will light up across 12 volts DC, but the glow plugs are on 10 volts DC. So I think the threshold voltage for the LED is probably at 12 volts or 11 volts or something, and 10 volts isn't enough to turn it on. So I've got to go back to the electronics store and buy a more suitable diode for that. The tack task, I decided to take the alternator out and have a better look at what's going on with it, and I'm quite disappointed to discover that the alternator is basically corroded to death. Let me show you. This is the head alternator. It does work. It will charge the batteries, it spins okay, and it powers the instruments that I need it to. But this post here, with that connector right there, I actually cut it off, is the post that the tack sensor goes onto. And so there was no shorting, there was no contact problem, but as you can see, the stud is completely rusted. This one was too. This is just the ground post, and there was a connector here, and when I went to turn the nut off, I actually used PB Blaster and other stuff, and I just twisted the stud right off. I don't know if you can see that very well, but the shiny is fresh metal, and I just twisted it off. This one here, for whatever reason, was fine. I was able to take the nut off this one, and it was okay. This one up here, again, is completely corroded. So I think what has been happening is that the radiator overflow is supposed to have a hose on it that takes the excess coolant away from the top of the radiator and into a bottle of some kind. And some previous owner either took it off or never installed it, or who knows what. And so coolant has just been dripping out of the top of the radiator and down onto the alternator. And even though it's working, I suspect that the inside of the alternator is probably just as badly corroded, and its time has come. So I'm going to take it home and see if I can't order a new one, and hopefully it's not too hideously expensive, because without that I really can't move the boat. So yeah, we'll take that as it comes, I guess. And what else did I do? Oh yeah, I topped up the radiator with coolant. I put some seafoam into the fuel tank. And the reason why I did that was because I don't know how long the engine has been running with those old gunky filters, and I don't know how much carbon buildup there is in the engine. And seafoam is very good at, one, treating your fuel, and two, for getting rid of carbon, cleaning out injectors, and that kind of thing. So I dumped some seafoam into the fuel tank, and it's not too late in the afternoon, but I have had enough, so I'm going home. And I guess we'll see you guys next time.